Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It's Tuesday, September 6th, 2022. Time for another show. Time to remind everybody of how wonderful this new microphone position is. I don't know. I think the sound is considerably better. And hopefully one day it reaches the point where you just can't stand to listen to reruns anymore because the sound quality is just not up to par. That's my aim in doing this, to ruin all previous broadcasts and all previous recordings of the show. We were out yesterday. It was Labor Day. Hope you had a good Labor Day yourself. Maybe you got a chance to take off from work as well, or maybe you were stuck serving the rest of us who were wanting to take the day off from work. That happens. Everybody expects stores and services to be open, and it's rotten. It's too bad. I feel terrible about it when if I ever bother to do anything like that. I mean, around here, Monday is trash pickup, and I have always kind of felt like shouldn't we have Labor Day off? And this is as clearly within the bounds of what should be celebrated as Labor Day. But I guess you don't have a lot of leverage in that job, and people do need the trash picked up. It does get inconvenient, and it is a dumb day to have your trash pickup scheduled. You probably shouldn't schedule Mondays because, you know, there's going to be interest in closing down fairly frequently. How many holidays celebrate on Monday, no matter what, the date may be. Things are observed on Monday. And if that gets in the way of trash pickup, then that's no good. But that's the way we have it, and I don't know what to do about that one. But it felt like somehow we should be give ourselves a chance to observe Labor Day, and it's always a big hit around here with the family when they're off, and I'm not telling them to shush because I have to do a radio show in the middle of their hubbub, although fairly frequently they sleep through it anyway. At any rate, we're back here today live. I thought it was interesting. Ran a rerun from last year. I didn't have a September 5th recording to go to, except if I went back several years. I guess September 5th has been either Labor Day or around Labor Day, or in some cases Jewish holidays, and I've had to be, that was the case I guess last year. They came quite early, the calendars being out of sync, but relevant to today, unfortunately. It seemed like I reviewed the stories that were used last September 5th. And we were still talking, or we still are talking about the number of, ultra MAGA people showing up at local events and government meetings and spewing their crazy conspiracy theories and basically holding local government hostage to their weirdo demands. It actually reminds me of another story that I did hear over the weekend. I don't think I put anything away on, but you may have heard this one as well, but let me see if I can dig something up. But the story was about a local meeting of the library, the local library in an Idaho town, where here we are. Yeah, CNN reporting on this one as well as others here. Armed Idaho locals show up to library board meetings and push ban of over 400 books. Well, okay. That's something that's happening around the country, obviously, in a lot of places, and Idaho is one of the places subject to it. But the fun twist on this one, as I saw in passing when I was reading the stories, was that the list of demands for the banning of certain books was, well, I mean, I don't know how they met this at the library with some, I don't know, surprise, incredulity, because the issue was that none of the books that they were demanding be banned from the library were actually at the library. They didn't own any copies of any of those books, and they were unlikely to in the future, given that they seem to be so controversial in the community or whatever. I mean, some of them are sometimes when the list gets to be like 400 long, it's very often not really super controversial books. It's just there's almost like an urban legend has grown up around book bannering circles. We have to get rid of this, and this, and they're often very popular, formative novels for everybody else in the country. But these guys need to see it banned. But in particular, they had on their list, well, you know exactly what they were targeting. They were likely targeting young adult fiction that might have LGBTQ themes, and that had to be banned. And, you know, for all the regular reasons, because, Satan is controlling you, you're a vampire pedophile, the whole thing. You know, this story was fairly familiar, but it was an interesting twist that none of those books that they were really complaining about were actually in the library. And of course, if the librarians tell you, well, those books aren't in the library, but you're a lunatic and you're armed, then, you know, you will stand there and feel justified in saying things like, well, that's exactly what a secret vampire pedophile would say about these books. You would obviously tell us that the books aren't even in the library so that we would shut up and go away, but we will not be silenced. We are mama bears protecting our cubs. We are yada, yada, et cetera, et cetera. And of course, you have them secretly in the basement of your pedophile lair / library. That's the whole point. So naturally, you're going to tell us that they're not there. But that doesn't matter to us because we're on to you and we're going to murder you because we know that you are secretly hiding these books and molesting and drinking the blood of our children, even though they come home every day and none of them ever report having been in the library or ever having been approached by you and have no interest in books, period. But you know how it is. The point is, God has told us that this is the truth, and so therefore we have to murder you. We're murdering you for God. That's what's happening. Anyway, so I don't remember whether it was in fact the case that the entire library staff ends up resigning or whatever, but certainly it's on their minds because they're all getting death threats. And the library's closed now, as I understand it, because no one wants to work there, and all these armed lunatics won't let anybody get into the library anyway because they'll murder you if you go into the library. I just want to get the Bible, but you should own one, so tough luck, and we'll have to murder you for not owning one. I don't know. It's pretty crazy. The CNN story has, we'll get some maybe facts about it out here. Armed Idaho locals show up to library board meetings to push ban of over 400 books. Is Bonners Ferry, Idaho, is that we're talking about. And I don't know. We'll spend a minute or two just trying to get the details and, facts about it so that we're not wildly speculating too much. But CNN's Nick Watt is in Bonners Ferry, Idaho. This is one of those write-ups, I guess, of just a video. So that's not going to help us at all. Bonnersville, Idaho, where locals are pushing back against activists trying to get more than 400 books banned from the library. Okay. Books the library doesn't even have. So it's definitely the same story. But happily, we hear that there's, somebody in town that has a brain in their head and is pushing back. But, very frequently, those people will then be run out of town. So, that's not great either. Let's see. Idaho Statesman, likely to have a little bit more detail on this as it is a local source. It's not about the books. It begins, North Idaho Library Director resigns over extremism. Okay, so there is at least one resignation here to note for the record. After a petition started last month to recall 4 Boundary County Library Board members over a routine policy update. This is where this has gone. Library Director Kimber Glidden has announced her resignation effective September 10th. So it was a while ago. It took a long time to reach our ears, I guess. This is from August 22nd, and she's still there, but effective, later this week, I guess. End of the week. Nothing in my background could have prepared me for the political atmosphere of extremism, militant Christian fundamentalism, intimidation tactics, and threatening behavior currently being employed in the community, Glidden wrote in her announcement posted by the library. Now, naturally, you, having paid attention to the news, will know for a fact that the only reason these people are so extreme is because Biden made them extreme by giving a speech in which he said, we really shouldn't be so extreme and be entertaining such crazy ideas out there. we should stop doing that. But the people who are doing it are really rotten, and they should cut it out. Extremism, as you know, to say something like that. That was the reaction of, CNN, the people who I had originally turned to for coverage of this stupid story. So that ain't good. Let's see, just a little bit more here. A push by a few parents to ban books with LGBTQ themes started early this year and has snowballed from there, library board member Lee Colson said. And it will snowball because, you put together one of those Facebook groups. We got to get rid of the LGBTQ themed books. And then some other people will throw in some other things. I once read that To Kill a Mockingbird is bad because something. I read that Huckleberry Finn is bad because something else. And, and nobody's going to say, now hold on a second. That's just crazy. You're really going overboard, because they're all crazy there, and you don't want to start that, because then they'll all have to throw themselves out of the meeting and no one will be important anymore. Widespread efforts to ban books and censor libraries are cropping up by groups across the Northwest and the nation, like an attempt to ban materials on gender studies from Meade School District libraries. Another librarian quitting over armed intimidation in Coeur d'Alene, and Idaho House Bill 666. I'm not kidding. That's not a glitch in the Matrix. Idaho House Bill 666, introduced earlier this year, which could have held libraries liable for checking out materials that could be considered harmful to children, as opposed to actually harming them. Giving them material that could be considered capable of harming them is bad enough. Did you harm them? No. But remember, this is House Bill 666. We don't need proof. In Boundary County, a local group is attempting to recall 4 of the 5 library board members, including Colson, after the board approved an updated collection development and maintenance policy. That's all it is. The new policy says selection of materials will not be affected by any such potential disapproval, and the Boundary County Library will not place materials on closed shelves or label items to protect the public from their content. Aha. Well, how wrong can you possibly be? Anyway, you get the idea. The point really here, all I really wanted to do in bringing you this story, and I guess I'll just mark it for you. You can read the rest of it, but I think you've probably seen a clip of the story probably on CNN or circulating online, and you've got the idea. Certainly you can imagine what's going on here. And I just thought, last year's rerun, unfortunately, still quite relevant because this stuff is still going on, as you can see, and the current example here. But last year we were talking about, oh my God, there's CRT in schools and we should stop it. Oh my God, something about bathrooms, and everybody's got it all mixed up, and people are raping one another left and right. We have to shut down the school system, etc., etc. You remember all the craziness that was going on, and it's still going on. And you can't put a stop to it because that's too partisan, apparently. You're not allowed to say anything about it. And you can see what the problem is. Meanwhile, Trump continues on. We'll get to his legal wranglings, the latest, probably for the rest of the show, in all likelihood. But I was just thinking about him a lot this morning as I was reading through what was happening on Twitter, and what did I see this morning here? Oh, look at this. We got a gun fail to catch up with. SV Date, that was it. I saw him tweeting in response to an NPR politics tweet. Now, what motivated NPR to run this story, I really have no clear idea. I guess I could read the story, but why would I do something like that? NPR tweeting, Trump can only serve 4 more years. The reason why has a long and sordid history. I'm not certain what's so sordid about the amendment to the Constitution limiting presidents to 2 terms, but I'm sure there was some legal wrangling. Maybe that's what they're talking about. Now I'm somewhat curious, but I was sort of wondering, for instance, what would make you think the headline NPR readers, in this case, need today is, we thought we would let you know that presidents are, in fact, limited to just 2 terms. And you probably needed a refresher about that. I'm not really certain what that was supposed to be. But the tone of it, I think SV Date was taking, given his comment, was, it makes it look like NPR is saying, come on, how bad could it be letting Trump into the presidency again, letting him assume the presidency a second time? Because after all, it could only be another 4 years. I mean, we can all last 4 years, right? Which I don't know. I don't know if that's what they're trying to get at or not. But and I don't know if that's what SVDate took away from it either. But that's kind of what it looked like to me. And that's, I mean, what's relatively obnoxious because, well, I think we have a pretty good idea what could happen in the 4 years. But SV, what do his friends call him? S? I don't know. Can I call you S? All right. Well, anyway, he responds by making or posing the question, and it's a good one. Does anyone seriously believe that if Trump were elected again, he would honor a 4-year term? That's an interesting question. And no, I mean, I don't. And that was his point in bringing it up, I'm sure. Let's see. How can I open this so that everybody can, all right, I'll mark it for sharing later. But it's a good question. Does anybody believe that he would honor a 4-year term? He will learn from his mistakes, he goes on to say. He will choose an acting defense secretary, acting DNI director, acting AG, acting DHS, who are loyal to him personally rather than to the Constitution. And that, of course, is a real and actual danger. And, of course, I had a couple of comments on his comment, one, of course, of which was, essentially, I don't know that he really lives as long as it takes to do this. He is term limited probably by his cholesterol count or age in general. I don't know. His father lived to a ripe old age, it's true, though at least one of his brothers did not. But at any rate, I think he loves to tell everybody he's got great genes, and I mean his sister's much older, and if in all likelihood, who knows how long he could live. But his lifestyle's not terrifically healthy, but whatever, it doesn't seem to make a difference. So there's that. I doubt very much whether if he were in office, whether he would really think, sure, one more term ought to be enough. I mean, why not? My interpretation, he might say, of if he wanted to go this route, why not interpret the Constitution? And by all means, invite the, 7, 8 Supreme Court justices he may have appointed by that point, to interpret things the same way. I interpret this to mean 2 terms consecutively is the limit, but I've served non-consecutively, so I've got another one coming to me. Well, no, the language is rather explicit. In fact, but who knows? Maybe the framers of that amendment were drunk or under the influence of Italian satellites or something like that. And or of course, then there's the more overt route of so what? Who cares? What are you going to do about it? But I do remind you all that there was, right in front of NPR and all the people who put together this, gee whiz, he can only serve 4 more years thing, Trump did make a demand during his first 4 years that he be given a do-over of his first 4 years. And it expanded into 4 years. At first, it was just, I should get my first 2 years over again because Russia, and it was all a hoax, and I should get all that time back. Like, he thought, in the time during which I was distracted or bothered by the news media coverage I was getting, that doesn't count as my presidency somehow, and I need to get that time replayed. So, I mean, he already has made an overt call for an extra term, and, not a far leap from that to maybe the term should last longer than ever, or maybe it should be 2 or 3 or 4 of them, and gee whiz, it's not my fault. It's what the people want. I'm cheating to make it look like the people want that, but whatever. And, of course, perhaps more dangerous. I mean, instead of entertaining the idea that, well, how much damage can he really do in 4 more years? We've survived the first 4. We'll survive the second 4 as well. 1, of course, that's not a given. 2, neither is his limiting himself to 4 years. And 3, I just want to remind everybody, which I guess we'll have to do during the next election because it looks for all the world like the Republicans are actually going to nominate this guy again, and I don't know why. But it's not a far leap. I mean, remember, he is out there saying things like, I should really be the president right now. I'm, in fact, the legitimate president of this country. I should be the president right now. The only reason I'm not is because the bad guys used secret Italian military satellites, okay? Secret. And that's why. That's one of the big problems with the secret is, the problem is, I know about it. I'm the president. I admit it. I've been the president for the past 4 years, as a matter of fact. But I get a lot of intelligence, a lot of top secret intelligence. I leave it scattered around my house. But no, I didn't leave it on the carpet. And that's the only thing that really matters. All right, I'm out of character in this one. But at any rate, I get all the secret military intelligence. You don't. That's just one of the things. I'd love to share it with you. But as they say, I could tell you, but then I'd have to kill you. And you should take him seriously about that. Literally and seriously. He does feel like he can kill you about those things. But I get the secret military intelligence, so I know about the Italian military satellites. And I know it looks like it's crazy because it's secret. You can't see it, but I can see it. And, I'm just wondering about if you accept that sort of reasoning or statement, even if you can't call it reasoning, from anybody ever, how far a leap is it from secret military satellites controlled by Italy have rigged the election, and that's why I have to have 4 more years. Constitution, it's not wrong. It's not wrong to say that a president should be limited to 2 terms. I agree with that. I love the Constitution. I love it. Love it so much. So much. I love it. I don't remember what I was saying. This is me wandering. Okay. But Italian military satellites were the ones that rigged this thing, and it's secret and you couldn't see it. Now, I have to tell you that because I've got some news for you. I'm the president again. And this time, secret Ethiopian satellites, I don't know, Chinese satellites have made it necessary, unfortunately, I'm sorry to say, this really grieves me to have to say, but I do have to say it, we're going to have to launch our entire nuclear arsenal. This, I know, everybody is upset about that. That could mean the end of humanity. But believe me, if you believe in MAGA, if you believe in America first, the way I do, you are, in fact, I have heard it from many medical doctors. My uncle was one. He was a genius. He proved you are immune to nuclear weapons. Certainly immune to our own. You don't think I had our scientists build immunity into the nuclear? He says nuclear. He actually does that correctly. So don't worry about it, but I'm afraid I have to let you know we got to launch it all. And some of it, there's not enough room for us to launch it all around the globe. So we're going to have to use some of it here at home. But I'm going to target Chicago and terrible cities like San Francisco. And that way we can wipe off the face of the earth all of the threats. Because the reason, unfortunately, is secret. But trust me when I tell you, that's the point. It doesn't take very much. We are already at the point where a guy who says he should be president, and in fact is president, tells people that secret military Italian satellites and bamboo from China is in the ballots, and everybody this and that, and it's been rigged and stolen chips from the computers. And the guy is psychotic. You can't put a psychotic idiot in charge of the nuclear arsenal. And anybody who thinks, if you still believe in, we have people around him that'll tell him you can't do this, you can't do that. And they did, and occasionally did prevent him from doing some of the craziest things. Occasionally. But how many times do you want to test that system? Eventually, all systems fail, right? And certainly lots of people did enough things getting away with the things he demanded, bending to his will and doing things that they weren't entitled to do, things that were horrific or illegal or unconstitutional, which I guess brings us around as we end our warm-up segment today to the developments of the weekend. I'm not certain what it was that drove Judge Luce Cannon, as I think that's what Marcy's calling her these days, down in Florida, from issuing her ruling in the special master case and putting out the written ruling on Labor Day, which is a federal holiday, and I think the courts were that's it. Why don't we should start a rumor, a conspiracy theory that the order isn't valid because it was issued on a federal holiday, and everybody knows that the federal government was closed. This can't be coming from a federal court on a federal holiday. It's a hoax. It was put out by the Trump people. I mean, and that would explain it, quite honestly, not only the timing of it, but the content of it. You will no doubt have heard by now about the weird ruling in favor of Trump's request for a special master. I'm not entirely certain that it does him as much good as he might think, because, well, one of the real oddities of the ruling was the judge is still scared, as scared as she may be, of getting death threats from Trump fans if she doesn't rule in favor of allowing a special master. She is also afraid of being attacked for stopping the intelligence community from reviewing the damage that may have been done from any leaks of the information that Trump stole and has kept around the house, or at least originally may have kept around the house, because now it's missing because all those folders are empty. We'll talk a little bit about that when we come back. But she's not afraid of blocking the DOJ investigation into criminal activity that may arise from violation of these statutes, but is afraid of stopping the intelligence community from doing a national security damage assessment. So she's allowing that to go forward. Will it work? I don't know. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, the same guy who was just talking to you a second ago. Our Patreon subscription drive is still going strong, with over 175 monthly donors who help keep us on the air. If we've helped keep you going during the pandemic, why not return the favor and help us keep going so we can all be together for the next disaster? Patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it easy to make secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for keeping you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We literally could not do this without you. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. So, yes, we're kind of getting into the swing of things here. Oh, let's see. I got to put this, open up this one too. Gosh, there's an awful lot going on here today. But yes, so yesterday we all learned about Judge Aileen Cannon's ruling, and there's a lot of analysis of it out there, in print news sources, on Twitter, et cetera, et cetera. But yeah, I'll tell you what, I'll get right to my initial reaction to the thing. She has this weird bifurcated injunction sort of thing in mind, and she doesn't call it an injunction. And there's some question as to exactly what the hell is this thing that she's handed down. And it matters because certain types of interference at this stage of the game, it wouldn't be termed interference, but, judicial action. If it's an injunction, it's appealable immediately. If it's some other kind of not exactly, and I'm not a, practitioner in this area or at all for that matter, but, did go through the whole rigmarole, but no practice, in this. So I can't be sure, but from what I understand from others, reading through it, there are only certain types of reactions from the DOJ are contemplated or permissible, and it depends on what exactly is it that she's handed down. But like I said, if it was a straight up injunction in which she says, and like I said, it's bifurcated. The ruling is essentially that the DOJ is prohibited pending the outcome of a special master review of the materials. And we'll talk about exactly what are they going to review separately. But pending the outcome of this review and any further decisions I or any other court might render based on the outcome, the DOJ is currently prohibited from using any of the materials that they seized in pursuing their investigation, the criminal investigation into what went on and whether or not they're going to charge them. And certainly they would be enjoined from going ahead and using it as evidence in a trial against Donald Trump. Although I'm not 100% certain how well that would hold up if you find yourself in some other judge's trial court and are asking for an evidentiary ruling and the defense says, well, the prosecution is enjoined from using it. I don't know that the judge doesn't just say, well, I've actually reviewed Judge Cannon's order and I find it unpersuasive and inapplicable to this situation. So I'm not, you were supposed to stop using it for investigative purposes, but your claim, perhaps, let's say, is that you were done with your investigation before she even issued it. So you're here. Yeah, I don't know how you're going to make the prosecution prove that the evidence that they intend to introduce and the factual basis for it wasn't developed prior to Judge Cannon's ruling. And Judge Cannon's ruling, I haven't read all the way through it. It may be that she may claim that it applies retroactively in that respect, that all the evidence that you've developed to this point is also prohibited to you as the possible fruit of an unlawful search, which it wasn't, and she didn't at any point say it was an unlawful search. It was conducted under a duly authorized search warrant, a duly issued search warrant. So she hasn't gone that far. But what she's saying is essentially the criminal investigation of the DOJ has to stay on hold, but I am afraid of being attacked as weak on national security or as damaging national security if I stand in the way of the national security and intelligence apparatus and the ODNI's investigation into what damage might have been done by having this classified information on the loose and this national security information being stored outside of proper channels, as maybe the most neutral way I can think of to say it. And so she doesn't want to stop that. But I'm not certain how workable that really is. Because, of course, the FBI is one of our chief arms, and certainly the chief arm of investigating counterintelligence operations, and they're going to need to have a say in this. A thorough national security apparatus review of the damage that may have resulted from the situation, however you want to describe it, would include the FBI's counterintelligence division as well. Now, is it possible, and it may be, if there's one thing the FBI is expert in, it's walling off its own information from, sometimes its own agents if they are working on a case and can't see something that should be compartmentalized. I mean, that's a thing that they believe that they can do. But I'm not certain how well it works if they're compartmentalizing from themselves and as well as and sharing information with ODNI. I don't know how well that's going to work. To tell the DOJ that one part of the DOJ can get this information, but the other part of the DOJ can't. On the other hand, the environmental division never wanders into national security and accidentally reads about nuclear secrets. They do a pretty good job. So it is possible, but I'm pretty sure that the ODNI would be very interested in arguing before that judge or some other judge on appeal perhaps, that this is really hampering our national security operation and it just can't stand. And it sounds like even Judge Cannon might have to bend to something like that. So I don't know how well this bifurcated system works. It will produce delay. And if literally all Trump is looking for from this play is delay, and it might be, this will generate it. On the other hand, the election was about to generate it as well. There's and once again, in the past couple, over the weekend, Byron York, among others, I guess, agitating for the mythical idea that what really, the real rule about election interference at DOJ and not bringing any cases that could possibly influence an election is a 90-day rule. Now, of course, everything else that I've seen says it's a 60-day rule. And when confronted with the reality that, well, everybody says it's actually a 60-day rule, he says, well, some people say it's 90. Well, no, they don't. I mean, they do. Some people who are wrong say it's 90 because they need it to be 90. But that originated, as far as I know, with Lindsey Graham, who got it wrong because he thought 90 days sounded like it might encompass the period of time during which he was speaking and calling for a halt in the DOJ's work. But the rule was 60 days. And in any case, had it been 90 days, they were still outside of the 90 days at the time that they were doing what it was that Lindsey Graham was complaining of. But no, people don't say it's 90. People don't say anything. But when they do, because they know what the rule is, they say it's 60. But I say, some people say it's 90. So he's doing a very Trumpy thing there. And I'll have to make a note to grab you that Byron York tweet. I responded to it, with just basically, he don't care what I have to say about it. But anyway, I just put that on the record, mostly so that I could find it later. So here we are. I don't think that the bifurcated system works to do very much, but the 60-day rule, such as it is, might do more to cause delay than anything Trump or his lawyers were able to come up with. But there it is. There's more to it. There's more problems with it. There's, for instance, the special master idea. Why don't we spend a little time on that one? The idea of appointing a special master to review this stuff. You might ask at this point still legitimately, what the hell are you talking about? What is a special master? If you want the answer for that, the special master stuff comes from Rule 53 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure. I put it aside for you. You can get it from the Cornell Law School, which has the best of the online, references to, can bring up the sections of code for you, bring up the rules of civil procedure. A special master is essentially somebody who gets appointed by the court, by the way, with the agreement of the parties. So I don't know who in the world we think both parties to this litigation are going to agree on for a special master. I know a lot of jokes circulating yesterday, like Donald Trump is going to demand, and this crazy judge could just give him. Well, Roger Stone will be your special master. Vladimir Putin will be your special master. You can be your own special master. Go ahead. And maybe, why not? I mean, like I said, technically the rules are that it has to be with the consent of both parties because, you're asking for an outside person to come in and carry out a function that, instead of the judge in the case carrying out this function for whatever reason. And so obviously in the real world, it's going to have to be somebody that both parties would agree to. They both agreed to consent to being before this judge. They didn't get to choose the judge, that's true, but there has to be some consent at operating outside of the jurisdiction of this particular judge. And so under normal circumstances, it's hard to imagine who they could agree on. Of course, the judge could say, well, I deem that you have consented to this, DOJ, so boom, here's your special master. That's totally outside of the powers of the judge in this case. But so what? So was holding out and saying, yes, I will appoint a special master. Why? The rules. So here's the rule. on Rule 53 from the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, which doesn't say special masters, it's just about masters. What does that mean in layman's terms? Again, something complex is going to happen in this case. So complex that it would be unduly burdensome, in all likelihood, on the judge overseeing the case to have to do this. There's such voluminous material. Or, for instance, there's something like usually where you see it applied, or we last saw it applied, where there was a claim of attorney-client privilege in some of the materials potentially seized. This happens more frequently, if you can call it frequently, when there is a seizure made from an attorney's office where there might be large amounts of attorney-client privileged materials, and not only that, but large amounts of materials that might not even be, that still attorney-client privilege obtains, but it's not even about this case. You know, if I raid Rudy Giuliani, well, Rudy Giuliani is a bad example because he has no other clients, really. But okay, if I raided, I don't know, what's the name of some of the other lawyers who have represented Trump? The parking lot lawyer. If I raid her office because I think she's got evidence of a crime committed by Trump, you know, fair bet that that's the case, and I seize whatever I think I need from that office, there's a pretty high probability, one, that there'll be attorney-client privileged materials as between this lawyer and Trump, and we don't want to allow those into evidence. But there will also likely be attorney-client privileged materials between that attorney and some other previous client, one of the parking lots, for instance. And you want to make sure that that doesn't get rifled as well. You know, you don't want people just looking through that stuff. So you might, in fact, use a special master to come in and say, I will take over the very burdensome and annoying job of sorting this stuff out so that it doesn't fall into the hands of the prosecutors by accident, and it doesn't take up the time of this judge. This judge has lots of other cases going on. We can't have it be her responsibility to thumb through every page of this stuff. We might ordinarily have the lawyers in the case do it, but in this case, there's enough sensitive material that we will have a special master. Now, how will you do it? All right, so here's the actual text of Rule 53, right? Here's how a special master is appointed. That's Section A of Rule 53. 1, the scope. Unless a statute provides otherwise, a court may appoint a master only to A, perform duties consented to by the parties. And I mean, does DOJ agree at this point? No, they don't. And this is that they opposed the appointment of a special master. Is that determinative? Not necessarily. Can a judge rule, all right, well, I order that the master would be appropriate here, and so I need you to agree on the scope of this person's work and who that person should be, and we'll hash all that out. But I can, presumably, order you to work diligently and honestly toward finding a compromise that you can live with. But the scope would be a master would perform duties consented to by the parties, would hold trial proceedings and make or recommend findings of fact on issues to be decided without a jury if appointment is warranted. By doing what? If appointment is warranted by some special exceptional condition, or the need to perform an accounting or resolve a difficult computation of damages, or address pre-trial and post-trial matters that cannot effectively and timely be addressed by an available district judge or magistrate judge of the district. So going through all this paperwork, basically they're saying pain in the ass, not really something that the judge wants to have to do for themselves. So maybe that's a reason to have a special master, if everyone will agree to it. Part C here reads, I just read that part. Part 2, rather, is on disqualification. You can't have a master that has a relationship to the parties, attorneys, the action itself, or the court that would require disqualification of a judge if they were being assigned to the case under 28 U.S. Code Section 455. unless the parties, with the court's approval, consent to the appointment after the master discloses any potential grounds for disqualification. But we're probably not going to have to worry too much about that. Section 3 here, possible delay or expense. In appointing a master, the court must consider the fairness of imposing the likely expenses on the parties and must protect against unreasonable expense or delay. Got a problem with the delay thing here. The expense, probably everybody can cover it, except I don't know if Donald Trump will pay his bills on time for that one. The order appointing a master is Section B here, the next major section. 1, notice. Before appointing a master, the court must give the parties notice and an opportunity to be heard. Any party may suggest candidates for an appointment. 2, contents. The appointing order, which we haven't technically gotten to yet, but when they actually name somebody, the appointing order must direct the master to proceed with all reasonable diligence and must state A, the master's duties, including any investigation or enforcement duties, and any limits on the master's authority under Rule 53C. B, the circumstances, if any, in which the master may communicate ex parte, that is, without the other party being there, with the court or any party. C, the nature of the materials to be preserved and filed as the record of the master's activities. D, the time limits, method of filing the record, other procedures and standards for reviewing the master's orders, findings, and recommendations. And E, the basis, terms, and procedure for fixing the master's compensation under Rule 53G. Issuing, that's Section 3 here. The court may issue the order only after A, the master files an affidavit disclosing whether there's any ground for disqualification, and B, if a ground is disclosed, the parties with the court's approval waive the disqualification. Amending the special master's authority, the order may be amended at any time after notice to the parties and an opportunity to be heard. The master's authority in Section C. In general, unless the appointing order directs otherwise, a master may regulate all proceedings, take all appropriate measures to perform the assigned duties fairly and efficiently, and, if conducting an evidentiary hearing, exercise the appointing court's power to compel, take, and record evidence. Goes on for some time, all of this stuff, basically laying out, though, and again, I'll tell you where you can find it, Rule 53 of the Federal Rules of Civil Procedure, sometimes abbreviated FRCP, if you're looking for it that way. And it lays it all out for you in ways that make it plain that there could be more delay involved in this simply because it will be next to impossible, I would think, for anybody to agree. I mean, I don't think that the Trump team is going to come with a fair idea of who should be serving as special master and doing what. Now, another reason for reading you the rules about appointing special masters and what sorts of things they can do and why, the history of why they've been appointed. One of the things you must have heard probably in all of these spot analyses and predictions ahead of time, ahead of the ruling being handed down, was that there has never been a special master appointed for assessing claims of executive privilege before. So this is a new thing. And, of course, that has a million other smaller items wrapped up in it, like, is there an executive privilege claim legitimately to be made here? The person making the claim, after all, is not the executive. That's an important thing. And they made that point to the judge, and Judge Cannon's response was, I don't know if it's as cut and dried as you think. You may be overreading the situation. Maybe there is a privilege that exists for former presidents as against current presidents, which is an odd thing. We've never actually believed that was the case, but no one's ever ruled on it, so therefore she thinks that there's room for creating such a privilege. No one has ever ruled on it because it's always been the assumption that, well, there's only one executive. That's the whole point. And the privilege, therefore, is presumed to belong to that executive during the time in which they serve as the executive. And the people who are no longer the executive no longer have the privilege. They may be able to borrow the privilege by convincing the current president. That's the idea here, is if your claim that, oh, this is so, secret or sensitive or whatever it is that it really can't be shared with the public at this point, you should be able to convince a current president that that's true. And if you can, because the current president might very well take into account something like, well, one day it could occur that I may have created a record that is very sensitive while I'm president, and I will one day no longer be president. And I can imagine the sort of situation where it would be in the interest of the United States and of a sane president of any party that might follow me to keep such sensitive material from the public. And if I extend this courtesy to a former president where there's a legitimate reason for having it, then I hope the favor might be returned in the future by another president should I request such a courtesy. But when you are covering up, or you're using executive privilege to cover up the criminal, potentially the criminal activity of the previous president, against which you ran for office in the first place. I'm running to replace this person, to bounce them out of office because they're doing things that are unconstitutional and illegal, and we need to get rid of them. I am not interested in covering up the evidence of that, and I'm not too worried about future presidents refusing to do the same for me because I'm not doing those things. I'm not committing those crimes. You might accuse me of it, but that would be the evidentiary stuff will be the least of my problems if I'm being accused by a sitting president of something like this when I didn't do it in the future anyway. And so he's not inclined to do that. Now, it hasn't even been a ruling directly issued by President Biden. Biden has, I think, as most presidents probably would in this situation, said, I defer the decision on whether or not to extend the executive privilege to those issue area specialists who are more in tune, and one, who aren't me, and two, who are more in tune with what sorts of materials is Trump seeking to protect, and would the claim to executive privilege ordinarily be honored by a normal, sane, sitting president if it wasn't me and it wasn't him? Would anybody else accede to this request? If not, then I delegate to you the authority to deny the request. And I can do that, of course, because remember this term from back in the days when Republicans were in office, George W. Bush in particular, I am the unitary executive. You act on behalf of me. I designate you as the decision maker in this. It's up to me to do that. I can do whatever I want, delegating my powers. I am the unitary executive. You're acting as part of me when you recommend denial of Trump's request, and that's what's going on here. What's interesting is how much damage this ruling, maybe inadvertently, does to the concept of the unitary executive. I'm kind of thankful for that part of it. The idea, one, that the current sitting president is no longer necessarily the unitary executive, because former presidents might be able to overrule current presidents with respect to executive privilege if something happens. We don't know what. There's no test. No terms have been laid out by Judge Cannon or anybody else. Even the academics who might have been imagining such a power haven't really said what the limits of them or the scope or definition of them may be. But so that would be destructive of the unitary executive theory all by itself. Not to mention the fact that, well, if the unitary executive theory, as Republicans exercise it, is true, then the DOJ being walled off from the information while the intelligence community has access to the information seems to be contradictory there as well, too. Now, you might, well, push back on that and say, well, again, that's always been the case. The intelligence community has access to certain materials that, again, the environmental enforcement, Environmental Protection Agency doesn't have access to that. True. But if the president were to say, actually, I think it is essential to the execution of our constitutional duties here to share that information, in whole or in part with the Environmental Protection Agency, he can, of course, decide to do that. That's the instant declassification thing that Trump was claiming was the case on a blanket order for anything he took out of the Oval Office with him to go supposedly read in the residential quarters. That's the real use of it, is when the president says, I think it's essential for the execution of our duties here that at least some of this information be shared with somebody who doesn't ordinarily have the clearance to read it. Not Jared needs it to sell to the Saudis or anything like that. But at any rate, so they could do some serious damage to the unitary executive theory with this, but that would be regular Republican gimmitarianism, Calvin ball in action, for sure. When we need for there to be such a thing as the unitary executive in order to explain some weird legal anomaly, like the president is ordering torture, despite the prohibition on it in the Constitution, something unitary executive, blah, blah, blah. I mean, I never really understood why that would overrule the Constitution, but nobody did. It was just something that they said, and that was enough for them at the time. Now, of course, a different president is just saying, I just don't think that the previous president's criminality should be protected. And I refuse to extend my powers to protect his criminality on the recommendation of the Department of Justice, by the way. But that, no, you don't understand. That's not unitary executive because reasons. We need to hand Donald Trump a win so that he doesn't sick his fans on me, the judge, or whatever her reasoning might be. And that's all there is really to it. I mean, last week there was a unitary executive. This week there just isn't, or at least not in this case, because I say so, because I don't really have to tell you what I'm doing or why. I'm just ruling, and you're going to have to live with it. Now, all of this is appealable, and or at least we think so, considering that it looks an awful lot like an injunction. So there will be, I'm sure, an appeal filed. Whether or not they fight about whether or not it's actually appealable, we have yet to see. I guess dumber theories have been floated. But it's impossible. It's hard to believe. So many of the dumb theories are wrapped up in this particular ruling. You'd think that there were none left elsewhere for there to be any other dumb theories floating around. But there's always room for more, I guess. All right, we'll be right back. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Let's see, other things to catch up on here. I mean, there's still a lot involved in making our way through the entirety of it's not even that lengthy a ruling, but there's just got so many problems with it. This will be going on for weeks, I'm sure, and we'll continue with the analysis of this. I do want to make mention of the fact, even though today is Tuesday and Greg is not with us, I'm sure we'll be covering it tomorrow. I'm sure he'll be itching to get to it at some point. But the leadership election situation in the UK is over with at last. We watched that rather closely over the past month or so when Greg was covering for us. Liz Truss has pulled out a victory and will replace Boris Johnson as leader of the Conservative Party and therefore presumably as Prime Minister as well. And then I guess we'll stand. I don't know when the next general election will be called, but that's settled. There were the several rounds of balloting among, I don't even know how they made the thing work. But yes, Liz Truss prevailed over Rishi Sunak, whose name we became familiar with during this race, former Chancellor of the Exchequer. And at any rate, her margin of victory, fairly significant, 57.4% to 42.6%. Widely expected, though, after she took a commanding lead in the polls. And I guess once we figured that out and knew the likely outcome, the interest from this side of the pond was somewhat diminished, at least on the show. But now it's done. And if I remember correctly, we were talking about Rishi Sunak sort of representing the, hey, I'm not a total space cadet portion of the Conservative Party. I guess the sorts of Republicans that presumably President Biden, to make a comparison here, was hoping would respond to his speech by wresting control of the Republican Party back from the MAGA movement, versus Liz Truss, who basically said, "Nah, I think maybe more of the same," as I recall, being her position. And I guess maybe this doesn't augur well for us here in the United States, after all. I don't know. We'll see whether there's any similar hangover here. I mean, I will say that, I don't know, it sounds like Liz Truss, as unwilling as she's been to distance herself from some of the major policies, i.e. major mistakes of the Johnson administration, I suppose, including Brexit, and I guess chiefly Brexit. At any rate, well, they're stuck with more of it, I suppose, and we'll see whether it translates directly into our situation. I'm not certain that it does. All right, but we'll analyze that more when Greg is on hand to do it. One of the things Greg did suggest that we look into is, well, it's easy to go with his suggestion, given that a number of other people have also suggested that we look this way. News from CNN, which, again, is on the bubble these days. But okay. Zachary Cohen reporting for CNN, news from out of Georgia, and we haven't really focused on what's been going on in Georgia for a little while. But this reminds me. His tweet begins this way: news. And that's important because he's from the cable news network. So that's what he would be tweeting about. News. The news is a Gop County official in Georgia who served as a fake elector. Remember those guys? Escorted two operatives working with Trump lawyer Sidney Powell into the county's election offices on the same day that voting systems there were breached, per newly obtained video. They actually have security video out there, and that's a good thing. And guess what? It catches the people who are perpetrating all the voter fraud while they're screaming about the fact that, or screaming about the supposition that everybody else is committing voter fraud. So here's the news from CNN. And by the way, when we're on the topic of fake electors, I think a story that fell by the wayside from last week that I ought to bring to your attention, and there might even be an article about it parked in here somewhere, but I got to scroll to find it. Yeah, there we go. From the Bulwark, noting last week that down in Georgia, where Brian Kemp is running for re-election as governor, and we hope he loses to Stacey Abrams, or, quits, anything. We'll take whatever happens. Anyway, Brian Kemp's running mate for lieutenant governor is also one of the fake electors, which is really super great for Georgia. So, I mean, we sometimes, for a while, we have given a pass to the very odious Brian Kemp, even though he was working on election, what would we say, voter suppression and election rigging of their own on the Republican side, even before we began discovering Donald Trump's delusions and what was driving him to try to practice the same sort of voter suppression in 2020. Although, anyway, it's not new stuff, but Brian Kemp, of course, you'll remember he ran for election while he was serving as Secretary of State, which is extraordinarily dangerous and poses just too many temptations, and we think he took advantage of all of them, and he's governor now. Anyway, so it should be no surprise that his lieutenant governor this time around is one of the fake electors. It makes sense. They choose those electors, fake or otherwise, from among the local political elite. So it makes some sense that there would be some overlap. It also makes some sense that Brian Kemp would be involved in this stuff, even though, I don't know, Brian Kemp just sort of, I guess, got some of the aura of Brad Raffensperger rubbed off on him, because, I don't know, they served in the same administration, and then Brad Raffensperger wasn't immediately accommodating to Donald Trump when he called him to say, hey, just find me the whatever requisite number of votes I need in order to be declared the winner in Georgia. And Raffensperger wouldn't do it. But you'll remember that my own theory on all of this is that Raffensperger would have done it if he had felt like he had legal room to maneuver. If he had legal cover to do what Trump was asking, he would have done it. And now the Georgia Republican-controlled legislature has given him the legal cover, and he would likely do it if asked now, but wouldn't do it then. And then somehow everybody thought, well, something, they're doing the right thing. So maybe Brian Kemp is also kind of sort of, he hasn't jumped in and tried to order him to do anything different. And he hasn't stepped in to say, I'll help you, Donald Trump. So maybe he's one of the reasonable guys, but he's really not, or at least he's not when it's, his election in the balance. Maybe he doesn't care about anybody else. And maybe that's what passes for a redeeming quality in these Republicans. Anyway, as it turns out, they're up to their own shenanigans. The Washington Post, is the story. That's interesting. How come I have one from the Washington Post and one from CNN? Is that right? Are they recommending different articles to me? I guess so. Yeah. So Zach Cohen's article is a CNN one, and it's his own. So, of course, he would be recommending his own article. There's nothing wrong with that. It's good for you. Self-promotion. And we all need a little bit more of that. And who sent me the Washington Post version of it? I feel like, I don't know. So which one should we read? We're just yelling at CNN about being lousy. Maybe we'll read the Washington Post one. CNN has its own things going on these days. As I'm sure you've noted in the background, they are apparently on a new kick, trying to, I don't know what, become somehow more centrist, maybe thinking of peeling off Fox viewers or something. They've had a number of dramatic departures of top reporters from CNN, apparently in disagreement with the editorial direction that they're heading in. That's something we could explore at some future date and get a better picture of that. And I'm sure Greg would have some things to say about that one too. Here's the Washington Post story about this. Election deniers repeatedly visited Georgia county office at the center of criminal probe, video shows. Emma Brown and John Swain reporting on this one, and not doing nearly enough to self-promote, or at least that I saw on Twitter. Maybe they're out there doing it and I just don't follow them. Anyway, technology consultants is what they're calling them, who sought evidence that Donald Trump's 2020 defeat was fraudulent, made multiple visits to a county elections office in rural Georgia in the weeks after an alleged post-election breach of voting equipment there that is the subject of a criminal investigation. We're back on the same topic here, which is that in a quest to prove that there has been election interference of some kind, to prove their theory that that has been the case, these Republicans keep committing election interference of their own. And they keep breaking into elections offices. I'm trying to prove that there was a crime here. And the only way I can prove that there's a crime is to commit either the same crime to prove that it's possible, or a different crime in my quest to get a hold of the equipment that I would need to commit the same crime to prove that it was possible. And you're just not allowed to go doing that. So where were we with this? Right. They made multiple visits to this rural Georgia elections office in the weeks following the claims that there was some sort of election fraud. Surveillance video reviewed by the Washington Post shows that the consultants, Doug Logan and Jeffrey Lenberg, made 2 visits in January 2021 to the elections office in Coffee County, about 200 miles south of Atlanta. Lenberg made an additional 5 visits of his own, on his own. The 2 men are under investigation for separate alleged breaches of voting machines in Michigan. They're traveling from state to state, breaching voting machines for America, of course. The footage also shows that earlier in January, Kathy Latham, I don't know how she pronounces it, the teacher and then chairwoman of the county Republican Party, greeted a group of outside data forensics experts when they arrived at the elections office shortly before noon on the day of the alleged breach. Latham has said in sworn testimony that she taught a full day of school that day and visited the elections office briefly after classes ended. She was one of 16 Republicans who signed certificates declaring Trump the rightful winner of the 2020 election as part of the fake elector scheme now under investigation by federal and state prosecutors. The new video adds to the picture of the alleged breach in Coffee County on January 7th, 2021, and reveals for the first time the later visits by Logan and Lenberg. It also provides further indications of links between various efforts to overturn the election, including what once appeared to be disparate attempts to access and copy election systems data in the wake of Trump's loss. Experts have expressed concern that such efforts could expose details of voting systems hardware and software that are intended to be tightly controlled, potentially aiding hackers who might seek to alter the results of a future election. In other words, the thing that they did is illegal because the fear is that if you are allowed to do that, you will basically find the keys to sneaking back into the computer and changing the election outcome after the fact at some point in the future. So, of course, that's what they did. Why? They say it was to find evidence of whether or not Biden had already done that in 2020. But other people might fear, with good reason, that well, what it really is about finding our way in so that we can do this in 2022 in the midterm elections, 2024 when Trump is running, either, both, every election from here on in, or we've already been doing it, we're just checking on our work. Who knows what they might have been up to. But, if you wanted to get that key, one of the ways you would do it would be to say, well, I'm actually looking for evidence that somebody else did it. Yes, you know how it is. Every Republican accusation is a confession. And wow, wouldn't it be surprising if that was the case here? Experts have expressed concern. Like we said, such efforts could make it possible to hack elections in the future. Data copied from the election systems in other states has been published online, which would, of course, make it easier for someone, including them, to hack elections later on. Georgia state officials and voting machine makers have downplayed the risk, pointing to safeguards that they say protect the systems from tampering. The Post reported last month that data forensics firm hired by pro-Trump lawyer Sidney Powell copied software and data from the Dominion voting systems machines used by Coffee County. The Georgia Bureau of Investigations has said it is investigating the matter. It just occurred to me, I don't know how plausible this really is, but, anything's possible these days. But suppose the scheme were slightly different. Suppose the scheme was, well, we are upset about Dominion voting systems and ESS and some other number of other electronic voting machine makers or vote counting machine makers controlling all of this. And we think they're, whether we really believe it or not, we are going to say, we think they're rigging it for Biden. And we're just trying to prove that that's possible or that they actually did do it and we need that data, et cetera, et cetera. But that could also be true. But along the way, what if it was, well, they're making billions of dollars selling these machines. And one, we think they're being rigged for the other guys. What if we were selling machines and we were making billions of dollars, plus we were rigging them for our own guy? Wouldn't that be awesome? Well, I don't know how to make voting machines, so we're behind the eight ball on that one. That puts us at a real disadvantage. Those guys are going to be able to sell a lot more machines with them knowing how to make them and us not knowing. Phew, I have, we could probably acquire that knowledge, but, we'd have to hire people who knew what they were doing and they would design a system. And then we'd have to break into this market. And this market is saturated as it is. But suppose, though, that we didn't have to learn to design a voting machine or a vote counting machine, whichever it may be, vote tabulation machine, if not an actual voting machine. But suppose instead that we simply stole all the secrets of how to make them by breaking into current machines and downloading the software and the systems and examining the hardware systems, etc. And then we could go and basically reverse engineer our own machines, complete with built-in functionality for stealing elections for Republicans, and then hand that over and go to our states where we control the state legislatures and the local boards of election and say, here's the deal. Dominion voting systems, whose hardware you're using to count votes in this county, is corrupt. President Trump says so. They're rigging the election for Biden and others. And even though your county voted overwhelmingly Republican and counted the votes as overwhelmingly Republican, they could have been even more overwhelmingly Republican. Not that that would matter because Electoral College, but never mind all that. The point is that you are using machines that are bought from a company that Donald Trump hates. And he would prefer that you buy your elections machines from a company that Donald Trump loves, or maybe even owns, or at some rate either depends upon, thinks will give him a better shake in the election and or pay him money. And what if I told you that there was a MAGA owned voting machine company that you could trust to count the votes for reals and totally fairly, wink, wink, and you wouldn't have to pay the evil Dominion voting systems people any money. And the money would go to good Christian people who love MAGA. How many of these Republican counties, or entire states for that matter, given that they control the legislatures, would simply say, yeah, it's a matter of policy for our state now, or this county, or what have you, however they chose to execute it, you will all now go buy this other voting equipment. Sure, it's rigged for Republicans, and that's the reason we're happy to have you buy it, but also the money goes to MAGA. How did they do it? How did they build such a successful, fantastic, wonderful, advanced machine? And the answer is they broke into the existing machines, copied their code, and then they're just going to put it in a different box with MAGA on it instead of Dominion and collect the money for themselves, plus rig the elections as they see fit. Maybe that has something to do with it. Maybe it has nothing to do with it. But either way, you're not supposed to be in these machines and definitely not supposed to be downloading their software. You will understand that, of course, when and if you ever bring out your own voting machines, because especially if you then program in, well, look, the Republican automatically wins according to our algorithm. And you can make up all sorts of gobbledygook to make it look like there was real voting, but that's the way I want you to count these things. And lest anybody find that out, we will, of course, take advantage of the same rules that were protecting Dominion voting systems machines by saying it is proprietary code and you're not allowed to examine it. That is, it should be illegal for anybody to be able to just walk into the office, crack open a machine, download the software, and look for rigging. Because we don't want you to find the rigging, so therefore you're not allowed to. And our Republican friends in the legislature will make it a crime for you to do so. What if we need to break into the other guy's election systems? Well, I don't know. I mean, the way the law works, it's on the books. We're not allowed to say that you can break in if you're a Republican, but not if you're a Democrat. That would be unconstitutional. Not that I'm worried about that, because remember that part 2 of this plan is, suppose we could just convince judges, prosecutors, whoever it might be, necessary and all this, to simply say, well, if a Republican breaks in, we won't prosecute. If a Democrat breaks in, we will prosecute. Won't that look horrible and hypocritical? Yes. Do you think we can get away with it anyway? Sure, especially if we do it and then the press sniffs around and says that's obviously partisan and hypocritical. And then we say, that's hate speech against Republicans. Take it back. How dare you? And then CNN runs a story that says, yeah, it kind of is hate speech. You're saying Republicans are committing a crime. Well, but they are committing a crime. I know, but saying it is hate speech, which is a crime also. So you've committed a crime. They've committed a crime. Both sides. You see how this is happening again? All right. Well, at any rate, I'm not certain what they're up to, but we'll see. They're on the scent here. Details of the Coffee County incident have come to light largely because of a flurry of subpoenas and depositions by plaintiffs in a long-running federal lawsuit against Georgia authorities over the security of the state's elections. Emails and other records they obtained from the data forensic firm, Atlanta-based Sullivan Strickler, showed that the coffee episode was part of a coordinated multi-state effort to access voting equipment in a hunt for evidence that the election was rigged. In other words, again, a crime committed in search of evidence of a crime that they believe was committed by someone else. The plaintiffs, including several Georgia voters and the nonprofit Coalition for Good Governance, obtained the new surveillance video in response to a subpoena to county authorities and provided it to the Post. The security footage shows only the exterior of the office's entrance area, and it is not clear what the consultants Logan and Lindbergh did inside. But of course they had no business there, so it's not hard to imagine what they might have been trying to do, given what they've said they are up to in public anyway. Latham would not and has not knowingly been involved in any impropriety in an election, but that's not what we're asking. Robert D. Cheeley, her lawyer, said in a statement to the Post, she did not authorize or participate in any ballot scanning efforts, computer imaging, or any similar activity in Coffee County in January 2021. Logan and Lindbergh did not respond to messages seeking comment for this report, but of course she apparently did greet them outside the office. She just doesn't know why. David Cross, not the comedian, but a lawyer who represents some of the plaintiffs in the civil case, said the additional visits raised questions about why the two men returned. The biggest concern that we have is future elections, said Cross, whose clients are pressing Georgia authorities to replace the state's ballot marking machines with hand-marked paper ballots, which eventually they'll want counted by a brand new upstart in ballot counting, Trump Elections Enterprises, Inc., or whatever they might call it. Logan and Lindbergh have played roles in the multi-state pursuit of voting machines by Trump supporters. Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel, a Democrat, of course, has asked for a special prosecutor to decide whether to pursue charges against them and others for allegedly conspiring to unlawfully access elections equipment in 3 counties there last year. Logan and Lindbergh also provided affidavits as expert witnesses in a post-election lawsuit in Antrim County, Michigan, after a judge granted Sullivan Strickler access to Dominion voting machine systems there. So they have had some success in getting legally sanctioned access to voting machines. Where they have not had that success, they have simply gone around it and asked for local elections officials to give them access, and they have done that. Sullivan Strickler previously said it would be fully cooperative with investigators examining the Coffee County matter and is confident that it has done nothing wrong. The firm said it acted in good faith and on instructions from licensed attorneys. Sullivan Strickler declined to comment for the story beyond its original statement. The new surveillance footage shows 3 Sullivan Strickler employees arriving at the Coffee Elections Office at 11:42 a.m. on January 7th. Latham had arrived 5 minutes earlier, the footage shows. She greeted the Sullivan Strickler team and let them inside. Shortly before 1 p.m., a 4th employee from the firm arrived. In her deposition last month, taken by plaintiffs in the long-running civil case, Latham said she recalled having gone to the Coffee County Elections Office for just a few minutes that day, arriving sometime after 3:48 p.m. when she received a text from Misty Hampton, then the county elections supervisor, that said, "Going great so far," whatever that's supposed to mean. Asked during a deposition whether it would have been possible for her to go to the election office during work hours, Latham answered, I taught a full schedule. I didn't have a planning period, so I can't remember. Records filed in the civil case last week also show that an attorney for Sullivan Strickler described Latham as the primary point of contact in coordinating and facilitating the firm's work in Coffee County. The footage shows Latham entering the building before noon, then leaving at 1:26 p.m. So a full schedule except for that point, I guess. She returned several minutes after Hampton's 3:48 p.m. text and then finally departed at 6 p.m. It shows. The building has a side door that is not shown in the footage. That's a shortcoming. While Ms. Latham does not pretend to remember the details of all that occurred on that specific date more than a year and a half ago, she does remember going to the elections office after teaching school on January 7th, 2021, to check in on some of the voter review panels from the runoff election, and she truthfully testified to those facts. Cheeley, her lawyer, told the Post. The Sullivan-Strickler team left the building at 7:43 p.m., more than 2.5 hours after the office's regular closing time, the footage shows. Hampton immediately followed. The data obtained from Coffee County by Sullivan-Strickler included copies of virtually every component of the county voting system, including the central tabulation server, according to an inventory obtained by the plaintiffs through discovery. The firm billed Powell $26,000 for the day's work, an invoice shows. Hampton previously told the Post that she allowed a team of outsiders into her office after the 2020 vote so that they could prove, quote, that this election was not done, true, and correct. Okay, just come in here and prove that for me, will you? Hampton and attorneys for County Coffee did not respond to messages seeking comment. How do you believe it? I can't believe they wouldn't comment on something like this. All right, time for us to take another break. We'll be right back with this and more after this. Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio, and we are joined just in the nick of time here. Joan McCarter calling in. Hey, Joan. How you doing?
Hi. That was just in the nick of time.
Yeah, everybody heard the nice ring, so everybody knew you're coming. Okay, good. I'm glad. I was wondering. I didn't want to, make an issue of it, but this is one of those days.
The Tuesday after the Monday.
Yeah. I mean, it's tough, and I I keep thinking about that as I'm writing the morning post, and I'm saying, I don't want to promise anything because, it's difficult and you never know. But I also don't want to say things and post. I was realizing I would say that once in a while. And I'm like, this looks like I'm just posting. By the way, it's Tuesday and untrustworthy Joan is probably going to screw everything up. Well, that's not right either. So I just say nothing. Kind of, but, you don't want to say those things. Because, who knows these days? Why would you want to go? I'm practicing access journalism. That's what it is.
There
I won't call you out for this because I want access. So I can understand all those CNN people risking the fate of the country and maybe the world for access to their stories because I don't know. I don't really feel like there's that much at stake necessarily, though. I'm not feel like I'm risking the fate of the world by saying, well, it's a holiday Tuesday. Things could happen.
Happy holiday Tuesday.
Well, okay,
happy end of summer, sort of.
Yeah, I guess so.
And happy run up to the midterm elections time.
Right. So that's something you can only do if you don't wear white. From here on in, apparently, there's 2 rules that go together. There's a lot of people, not a lot of people, maybe wearing white anyway. Is Portland a big white wearing city? Probably not.
Not that I've noticed. No.
Yeah, I would think not, but you never know. But yeah, okay. Labor Day now being behind us. I guess you're officially allowed to talk about the elections without looking like an election nerd of some kind now, even though it's the fate of the world. Should probably be talking about it all the time. But now we're allowed by the people, by the way, who professionally talk about elections day in, day out, no matter what day of the year it is, and talk about presidential elections and primaries 3 years before they happen. Now grant you, the layman, the opportunity to talk about elections. This is when they think you pay attention, even though they pay attention professionally 24/7.
And we've been seeing wall-to-wall primary ads on our TVs for I don't know how long. And at least here in Oregon, because we're close to Vancouver, Washington, and that market.
Oh, okay.
We're getting both Oregon and Washington, and boy,
How's it going?
It's annoying. It's irritating.
All right. Well, is anybody airing ads that one side is full of vampires or pedophiles? Because you're lucky if not. That's
we
good.
don't have vampires and pedophiles yet. I mean, we've got some pretty scary people, particularly in Washington State.
Oh, all right. Well, anybody special that you want to talk about, or just
the challenger to Patty Murray, who was in the news last week for refusing to actually say to Dana Bash, that CNN's Dana Bash, that yes, President Biden won legitimately.
That's
he is the president because he won the election.
Yeah, he's just that was supposed to be, I guess, very clever that she wouldn't say he's the legitimate president. Just that, well, he is the president. We're treating him as the president, is what she was, I guess, hoping MAGA troops would think she was saying, like, wink, wink. Yes, I acknowledge that the press thinks he's the president, but that's
very
it.
Subtle.
Yeah.
Very subtle.
I saw some clips of that circulating and some commentary on just how unsubtle she was about it, and that she broke into like weird, inappropriate laughter when she was called out on it, because like nervous laughter, like I do look kind of stupid. Jay Rosen, I think, had made that observation. Look at the way she's giggling. Like the nerves get the better of her because she knows it looks ridiculous. She's being asked specifically to say, yes, but legitimately, well, I'm laser focused on getting rid of Patty Murray.
Exactly.
Good, nice training, but didn't work. So you have to watch that happen, but it's not your fault, the outcome, but we can't blame it on you. You're on the other state.
Honestly, I'd rather watch this than Idaho, so.
Okay.
Where they don't need to bother to advertise because Republicans are going to win anyway.
I guess so. Right.
And scary Republicans. We did have an interesting thing happen last week in Idaho with a special session of the legislature called precisely to increase education funding. And that was done precisely because Reclaim Idaho, the group that got Medicaid expansion on the ballot, and got it passed.
Remarkable.
And successfully fought off 3 efforts by the legislature to basically end the initiative petition business in Idaho. They tried to shut that down. Reclaim Idaho has had major successes, including this. They have an initiative that they were getting set to put on the ballot. They had plenty of signatures to start taxing the wealthy in order to fund education.
Oh.
It's so, trying to head that off at the pass, Governor Brad Little called a special session, and they increased education $410 million.
Oh.
So that's pretty significant.
Yeah. Who's running this operation? We need to start talking about that person's name frequently, I guess.
His name is Luke Mayville.
Okay. Congratulations.
He sort of got the germ of the idea, but he's working with close friends from North Idaho. Started this organization thinking that, we've got to figure out how to save the state. And more power to him. He has the energy to do it. He's young.
Wow. Okay. Well, good. Yeah. I mean, I guess
it was better for me to just say, this isn't going to work. I have to go.
Yes. Well, thankfully there, some others who, you've taken your turn. You did it for years and, you needed some relief. So here it is. But it's been remarkably effective. And I remember that sort of surprise, or it was a surprise to me that they would, actually win and get, Medicare expansion there, but
Medicaid.
Medicaid expansion there, but even this
with better than 60% of the vote,
and it makes sense.
There are only 2 or 3 counties that it didn't win in the state.
Well, it's an excellent approach because I don't know. I mean, essentially, it's something that if you're just viewing it, maybe that's it. Maybe it takes it out of the context of. It's not that it's out of the context of partisan politics, but there are no politicians directly involved in advocating for it. It's simply, well, you, the people, decide, and this is going to help you get medical attention when you need it. don't we want this? You know what? I kind of do. And I don't have to reject it because Donald Trump says he doesn't like it or because the politician promoting it is from the party I don't like. I can just vote straight on the issue. That appears to have worked.
And it worked really well.
Here again.
The downside, and I'm wondering how this is going to play out. I haven't really looked closely at initiative petitions, the success of them in various states. I think we're going to see it this year in Kansas, Kentucky, and Michigan with the abortion amendments to constitutions.
Yeah.
How much down ballot loss is there after that vote? I mean, we saw a lot of just Medicaid votes on ballots in Idaho that year in 2012. 2012? No, it was. Now I'm forgetting.
Yeah, all right. But that's interesting. Yeah, people would come and cast just that vote.
Voted just on the initiative and didn't vote for any politicians. I don't know if that's going to be the case with abortion because it is so obviously a partisan issue with the Republicans, elected Republicans and Supreme Court Republicans, not necessarily everyday rank and file Republicans out there not in elected office. It'll be interesting to see whether there is a real rallying behind Democrats or whether people just vote on those constitutional amendments.
Yeah, so, I mean, I guess that's a possibility. But even here, without getting to the ballot, you simply get the result early. I like the idea that, in order to head you off, we'll do the right thing.
You know, what they were heading off particularly was more taxes on rich people and on corporations. So, the funding is not coming from that in the legislation passed by the legislature. But it is going to education, so that's something. That's pretty key.
Yeah, it's always good to force them to do at least part of the right thing. It's a great result, and of course they can still come back at them, I suppose, later on. I don't know if that obviates the whole
I'm not sure
measure.
where it leaves the petition.
That's a good question. If there's other parts of it that weren't enacted.
I've got to do some digging and find that out.
But a great use of the system, and of course that's why alarm bells are ringing in Republican legislatures around the country. We got to get rid of this ballot initiative system, or as has been the case in some other Republican-controlled states, well, we can keep it so that maybe we can use it later, but why don't we simply overrule the results when they don't come out good?
Yeah.
So they've done that.
And that's generally how they've been approaching it, I think, in states that aren't Idaho. I haven't seen a huge movement in other states to make it impossible to do a ballot initiative like they've tried in Idaho. Yeah.
Well, not all states have them to begin with, but those that do are making some interesting use of it, and where the Republican legislatures aren't just playing gimme-tarianism Calvin ball with it afterwards and saying, okay, fine, but we're not going to enforce it like they did with the restoration of voting rights in Florida and expansion of Medicaid in Missouri, was it, where they decided, oh, yeah, right, I know people said they wanted us to do it, but they didn't mean it.
Yeah, or in Maine.
Oh, Maine did it too?
LaPage.
Okay.
I like to say LaPage. I don't know why. I know it's LaPage. But
LaPage is fun. But we are playing. Are we playing the xenophobia game? We're so afraid of French people. They're so very discriminated against here in the United States. French. Yeah, I suppose there's still room for doing that without really endangering anybody. the massive French community.
Yes.
Sizable, but I think they've assimilated pretty well. Anyway, okay, so that is interesting news from out of as you can't stop watching Idaho, but they keep fascinating us.
It's hard, so.
I was doing an Idaho story to begin with, the library.
I know,
unbelievable, and I'm sure they're not the only one facing the same. Even in Idaho, there's probably another library we haven't heard about yet that they're having the same problem.
The Meridian Library System. Meridian's a bedroom community of Boise.
Okay.
out on the west side of the county where the bad kind of California tend to be moving in, as my father would have said.
Okay.
They had a library board meeting last week overrun by supporters. It was kind of nice.
Okay.
They said normally they've got like 2 people that show up to the library board meeting every month because,
that's how you can...
it's the library board.
Right.
But they, of course, have been under attack like so many.
Mm-hmm.
And the supporters outnumbered the opponents by 95-5 or something. It was really
good.
encouraging to see in that county, particularly in that part of the county, people stepping up to say, yeah, we value our library and go away. Stop it.
Good. Yeah, and I mean, I guess that's probably the way it is in most places. Of course, the difficulty is, one, getting people interested in the library board. 2, getting people to say, I am interested in opposing these people, but I'm also afraid of being shot by these people.
Yes. And it's a real thing in Idaho. People go around with guns all over the place.
Yeah. And, there's just no dealing with somebody who shows up and says, well, I demand that these books be banned. Well, we don't have those books. Well, that's because you're lying and you secretly do have those books. No, it's because we don't have those books. Well, that's what I would say if I were a pedophile vampire trying to hide these books. So prove that you're not that. Ha-ha, you can't. And if you do, I'll shoot you. Oh, well, I don't know how to deal with that. That's just not something that you can... There's no bipartisan compromise with that, so I'm not sure what to do. Exactly. But yeah, thankfully, I mean, the reality is that even in lots of places where you think it's all crazy people, the truth is that, 95% of the people know that having a library is a good thing, even if they are ultra conservative. And they will show up and say, it's a bad use of guns to threaten people like this at a library board meeting because of some self-fulfilling crackpot fantasy that you have about there being a secret cabal in the basement. It's just a library. And my guns say so too. So,
which is an astonishing thing that has to be said
in
2022 in America.
Right. And yet there it is.
And yet there it is.
But there's also normal politics sort of happening elsewhere. Maybe kind of.
Well, Congress does come back into session.
That's the thing.
This week. That's relatively normal.
Sort of. I mean, although I did read this morning, as you probably did, that, 538 did a quick survey of the congressional candidates out there and found 100 and something of them who were full-on election deniers, who I guess were the nominees for. So it's like 100 and something people with at least, I don't know, a coin toss of a chance of getting into Congress. And I mean, although I'm not certain that it's all that different from our current Congress, honestly. They're not asking.
Well, particularly the House. Yeah.
So that's a little disturbing. But
it's a lot disturbing.
Yes. All right. I'll admit it's actually much more disturbing than I let on.
It's a lot disturbing when you think about the fact that the Supreme Court is taking on that batch.
Yes. All right.
Independent state legislature theory.
Okay. Oh, yes. Right. Are we going to see this again? Or are we? I mean, they have addressed it. Didn't they? Or they agreed to take it up?
They are going to hear the cases fall.
Okay, I've forgotten that. And we had our big, freak out moment about it. And now I felt like there was this burst of energy. Is the case over? I forget. No, it was just anger at the fact that they were taking the case. Oh, we just have to sit through
next month. I don't know when they're going to hear it for sure, but it is going to be in the fall term, I think.
Right. That will begin in October. So at some point. Well, they may drag this out forever. They tend to do that. And then it'll be like the last opinion released at the end of the session. And all be waiting for it. I think we've been through that drill before.
But,
yes, it's coming.
I don't know what, and this is something to explore as well, whether the midterm elections is going to make any difference with them or not. If Democrats do manage to hold on to the House and Senate, are the Supreme Court going to be ready to go there? I think probably yes, because they're crazy.
Well, they'll need to in order to win.
Thomas, Kavanaugh aren't going to care what happened in the election.
I guess not. A positive outcome for Democrats may motivate them. Oh, now more than ever, we'll need to have this in place for 2024. The independent state legislature theory shouldn't have much to do with the midterm elections anyway.
No.
So it won't help them.
It's going to be, can we slate these fake electors?
Yes.
Can we decide who's counting the votes?
Yeah. And so there aren't any to count in 2022, those votes, electoral votes. So they have some time. And I guess there's every possibility that a positive outcome or even a nearly positive outcome, like less losses than were expected for Democrats, will say, all right, that just reinforces in Republican minds the necessity of having this as a backup plan. And,
kind of makes you wish we'd already expanded the Supreme Court, doesn't it?
Yes. A lot of things that I wish we had already taken care of. That reminds me that I saw earlier this morning. Wasn't it a priority that we review or reform the Vacancies Reform Act, the process by which Trump was able to simply replace everybody who he fired with acting this, that, and the other thing, and never actually submit them for Senate approval. That was at one point a priority, and I did see the suggestion that, that, like right after we were supposed to fill up all these judgeships, shouldn't we maybe be reforming that quickly in the next couple of weeks before it's out of our hands if we lose control of the Congress, and instead Republicans are able to manipulate the vacancy process in advance of a possible Trump, putsch, let's say.
Yeah.
So
they did.
That's a thing to worry about. No. There's a lot of things that I'm sure that they wish they had had time for as well.
Well, a lot of things they could have made time for. They could have made time for filling all of the judicial vacancies that are in front of them right now.
Right. You've said that.
They did a good job early on. There's been kind of a lull, and now it'd be really good if
yes.
Dick Durbin decided to toss the whole blue slip tradition and they just started jamming them through. Yeah, they can't. There's not enough time to fill every vacancy at this point because they've wasted it. They should have been there in August, just shoving them through.
Yeah. Well, that's sad, but it's out there. And instead we have last minute, the modern equivalent, I guess, of midnight judges like Judge Cannon, sitting in Florida, confirmed after the 2020 elections.
Yep.
Oh, well.
And, is she going to be impeached? Probably not.
No, I doubt it very much.
Is she going to make her entire career out of being a Trump judge? Yes, probably. Is she going to end up on the Supreme Court? Well, that depends, doesn't it?
Yeah, that would be a long shot, of course, just because, there's a lot of competition. And there's surely crazier and more loyalist judges out there anyway.
Probably, but if Trump won in 2024, would Trump say, okay, I'm expanding the Supreme Court and I'm expanding it with her?
That would be interesting. That would be a very popular thing to say at a rally, I'm sure. And it might just translate into action because, I don't know, something Biden's too partisan, I guess. He forced it. It's Biden's fault. He was very divisive.
And with the Marines.
Yeah. Oh, my goodness. Right. As opposed to the former guy who, actually did the same thing. Marines. Oh, and cops and firemen and but, the optics, there were two of them, that could corrupt the whole Corps. So, I don't know. That was definitely the theme for the weekend among the apparently among the CNN ranks in particular, where I guess they're under some pressure to be more, I don't know, I guess they
more
would call
Fox-like?
it. Yeah, they would say more centrist because, of course, they were, as everyone knows, far left CNN before. But, yeah, who would have thought that CNN, it's difficult to believe that they would ever have been upset with Marines on their screens. But it depends on who's using them. If a Republican is using them for war or just standing around and looking cool, then it's awesome. If Democrats have them nearby, that's obviously a problem. Can't have that.
Can't have that.
Well, yeah, not surprising there, but I don't know. Still, I don't know. It still makes you gasp every time you see them do stuff like this. Because, they were reporters when the other guy was president. I remember them being on the air.
And they were really kind of under attack by the former guy.
Mm-hmm. Right. Enemy of the state, et cetera, et cetera. Dangerous to cover the rallies. They would throw things at you. But then again, Marines. So there you go. There you have it. Not allowed to. I don't know. What else on your mind these days?
Well, we did say last week that we would check in on the North Carolina Senate race.
Oh, okay. Well, we better then.
Which should have happened before. Because, yes, we have endorsed Sherry Beasley in North Carolina.
Okay.
And we're raising money for her along with Fetterman and gosh, I'm slow this morning. All right, we have three.
Okay.
We have three.
Everybody go look that up after the show. So, all right, Beasley, Fetterman, and special mystery guest
Mandela Barnes.
Okay. Good pull there. All right. That makes some sense, of course. And right, pumping them up and helping them across the finish line, extremely important. Fetterman, target of, typically scurrilous, but maybe even a little bit more scurrilous attacks than usual from Trump over the weekend, too.
Yep.
So he could use your support, I am sure, and it's certainly looking very good for him. Everywhere else where it might be a little bit of a close call, okay.
Like North Carolina.
Yes. Good place
to intervene. The latest PPP poll from last week from September 1st has them neck and neck.
All right.
42-41 with Beasley leading.
Okay.
Over House member Ted Budd.
Oh, yes, right.
Yes.
It's just very typical, I don't know, something strange about a name that short.
Yeah.
Ted Budd. And three of the letters
North Carolina
of D.
is a place where it is still legal to have an abortion.
Okay.
Ted Budd is one of the Republicans in the House who supports a national ban on abortion with no exceptions for rape or incest.
Because he knows so much about what it's all about and how things work.
Yeah.
Sure. Okay. Well, let's see.
So, it shouldn't be neck and neck there. But because it is North Carolina, and North Carolina is not Alabama.
Right.
But we will see.
Yes.
That's a good place to put some of your get out the vote and dollar energy.
Yeah. All right. So it's good targeting, and that's a place where your dollars could make a difference in the last couple of weeks. They'll make a difference everywhere, of course. But if you are thinking, okay, well, Fetterman may be doing all right, certainly you don't slack off there. And if you can spare the dollars, sparing them for both and for Mandela Barnes as well. But okay, if you want to target things, okay, maybe the other two are more in need, perhaps. But I don't want to sell him short, certainly. But
no.
Anyway,
but also,
job.
Look down ballot as well.
Yes.
Look at
Always
your
important.
state legislature and make sure that Democrats are going to be able, if they are in control, they're going to be able to keep control. And that Republicans don't get anywhere near supermajorities in some of these states, like North Carolina.
Anything you can do to prevent that.
And the judgeships, too.
do your research. Sometimes it's difficult to tell. They like in a lot of states to keep the judgeships
Daily Kos
nonpartisan.
Elections and Elaine, Julie Louis Dreyfus,
right,
have made that easier.
That's true. So, utilize that resource.
You can always trust the Daily Kos Elections team to find the best races, and they have. So,
right. Also,
go there first.
Yeah, and if you have any questions, and that's something to do ahead of time, people ought to make a habit of comparing their sample ballots and scan them and then take a look over them. I don't mean put them on the scanner. Use your eyes. Take a look and see what's there. Then go over to Daily Kos Elections and see what they have to say about those races. Because if there's a controversy, no matter how small, or interest for national Democrats, they will sniff that out for you and let you know. And sometimes there's just not a lot of information heading into these things, but the smallest bit of info will be discovered by the Daily Kos Elections team, and they'll send you in as an informed voter. So that's what you ought to be doing. Thanks again, Joan, for coming by. Good to hear from you after a holiday weekend.
I'm not totally lame.
We appreciate it. Thank you. We'll see you next week. No holiday next week.
From networksradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Yes, and with Joan McCarter, as predicted, even though just in my head, because I didn't say it out loud. Next, of course, I predict that Justice Putnam will be up next with the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and I speak with a certain amount of confidence in that, almost positive that he will follow us with stories that we didn't get to, so stay tuned.